My husband walked out without a word, so I walked into the arms of a man who only saw me as something to use. When my husband left me for no reason, I let my affair use me. I remember the sound of the zipper, that long, slow drag of teeth closing over fabric. It was the only sound in the room as my husband packed his bag. No yelling, no fight, no slammed doors. Just silence. He moved like a ghost, pulling shirts from the closet, folding them into the suitcase, and refusing to look at me. I begged him to talk. I asked what I did wrong. My voice cracked, tears streaked down my face, but he never turned around. He didn't even sigh, just zipped, folded, packed, and walked. The door closed. That silence screamed louder than any fight we'd ever had. I sat on the floor that night, staring at the empty side of the bed. My body shook from crying. My chest hurt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted him to come back, to scream at me, to tell me something, anything. But all I got was the echo of nothing. That's when the messages started. A coworker, someone who'd always been too friendly. His words were smooth, comforting at first. "You don't deserve this. If I were him, I'd never walk away from you." I should have ignored it. I should have thrown my phone across the room. But when you've been abandoned, even poisoned water feels like salvation. I wanted to feel wanted. I wanted to forget the cold silence. So I replied. The first time we met, my hands were shaking. It was reckless, wrong, everything I knew I shouldn't do. But in his arms I felt something. Not love, not even kindness, just attention. His touch filled the emptiness for a while. And for a few hours, I could pretend I wasn't invisible. But it didn't take long for the truth to hit. He didn't care about me. He didn't ask about my pain, my fears, my sleepless nights. He didn't want to listen. He only wanted my body. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I could handle being used, because at least I wasn't alone. At least someone looked at me, even if it wasn't with love. The meetings became routine. His calls at odd hours, his messages that felt more like demands than invitations. And I went. Every time. Each time I left, I hated myself a little more. The shame clung to me like a second skin, but I kept going back. Because being wanted, even for the wrong reasons, hurt less than lying in that empty bed remembering the way my husband zipped his bag without a word. One night, after another hollow encounter, I sat in the car and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My mascara was smudged, my lips swollen, my eyes red. I didn't recognize myself. I whispered, "What are you doing?" But I already knew the answer. I was trying to fill a hole that couldn't be filled this way. Still, I couldn't stop. And then one evening, I came home and found his side of the closet, even emptier than before. My husband had returned briefly, not to speak, not to see me, but to take the rest of his things. No note, no explanation, just absence. I sank to the floor, surrounded by his missing presence and my growing shame. But his leaving wasn't the punishment. The punishment came after. I used to think marriage was forever. I remember the fragments of what it used to be. The sound of his laugh in the kitchen when I burned toast. The warmth of his hand across the table at dinner. The nights we stayed up talking about everything and nothing, tangled in blankets, convinced that kind of closeness would never fade. But it did, slowly, quietly. The laughter was the first thing to go. Then the small touches, then the conversations. Before I even realized it, the man I loved was only a shadow across from me at the dinner table. He stared at his phone. I stared at my plate. We slept back to back, a gulf between us that no one dared cross. I kept telling myself it was normal, that this was just what marriage looked like after years together. But I felt hollow, invisible. When the affair began, I told myself it wasn't really cheating. It was just filling the void my husband had left. It was attention, a reminder I still existed. I convinced myself it was harmless, but guilt gnawed at me. Every time I came home after seeing him, I scrubbed my skin raw in the shower, like I could wash away the shame. I'd sit on the edge of the tub, my chest heavy, my throat burning with words I'd never say. I told myself I'd stop, but the silence in my house always drove me back. And then, after my husband left, even that affair evaporated. He stopped calling, stopped answering. His messages dried up. Just like that, I wasn't even worth using anymore. I had been abandoned twice. Once by the man who promised me forever, and once by the man who promised me nothing but still left anyway. I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, asking questions that never had answers. Was I not enough? Was I too much? Did I deserve this? The whispers started soon after. Family members avoiding my eyes at gatherings, friends who used to call me daily suddenly too busy. I could hear them in hushed voices, the words they thought I couldn't hear. Used? She threw her marriage away. No wonder he left. The labels stuck to me like a brand I couldn't erase. Even when no one said it out loud, I felt it in the way they looked at me. I tried to fight it. I tried dating again, desperate to prove I could be wanted. But it was worse than the whispers. Every man seemed to sense it, the desperation, the emptiness. They pulled back after a few dates, ghosted me, or fed me polite excuses. I saw the judgment in their eyes when my past slipped into conversation. It was as if the word cheater hovered above me in invisible ink, burning every chance at something new. One night, I sat across from a man at dinner. He was kind, soft-spoken. For a moment, I thought maybe I had a chance. But then he leaned back, folded his arms, and said, "I heard about you. You let another man use you while your husband was at home." I froze. My blood turned to ice. That was when I realized my past wasn't just haunting me. It was following me into every room, every conversation, every new start. And then I heard the story my ex-husband was telling. The story spread faster than I could breathe. My ex-husband told everyone his version, that I wasn't just unfaithful, but that I'd let another man use me like trash. That exact word, trash, burned through my chest like fire. He didn't shout it, he didn't post it online. He whispered it, carefully, strategically to the right people. And whispers travel further than screams. At work, I could feel the shift. The break room chatter would fall silent when I walked in. A coworker who used to share lunch with me suddenly kept her distance. I caught the smirks, the raised brows, the pitying eyes. At the grocery store, neighbors greeted me with tight smiles that didn't reach their eyes. One woman leaned close to another, whispering just loud enough for me to hear, "That's her. That's the one." It spread into my dating life, too. Men who seemed genuinely interested at first would suddenly vanish after a few texts. Sometimes they'd even tell me why. "I heard about your past. I don't want to get caught up in that." I became a ghost of myself, shrinking under the weight of shame. It felt like my ex-husband had stolen my voice and replaced it with his story, and the worst part was, I almost believed him. I sat on the bathroom floor one night staring at my reflection in the mirror across the hall. My eyes looked empty, my lips trembled as I whispered the words he'd said. Trash. Was that what I was now? Was that all I'd ever be? The shame was suffocating. Every failed date, every whisper at work, every cold glance from family replayed in my head until I couldn't tell where their voices ended and mine began. I questioned everything. If I even deserved love, or if my punishment was to live branded forever by a mistake. But somewhere in the ashes of that shame, something shifted. I started looking back, not just at the affair, but at the years before it. At the marriage where I begged for scraps of attention. At the affair where I settled for being used. At the friendships where I was always the one reaching out, the one giving more, the one clinging to prove I was worth something. I saw the pattern. For years I had given myself away too cheaply. I had let people define me, use me, discard me, and I told myself it was better than being alone. I had traded dignity for crumbs of affection. The realization hurt more than the whispers. It was raw, ugly, and undeniable. But beneath that pain, something else began to grow. A tiny seed of defiance. If they were going to call me trash, fine, but I wasn't going to live like it. If they wanted me to drown in shame, fine, but I wasn't going to sink quietly. For the first time in my life, I felt the stirrings of rebellion against the story others had written for me. That's when I decided to rewrite the ending to my story. I didn't rewrite my story all at once. It started with therapy. Sitting across from a stranger who didn't flinch when I told her the ugliest parts of me. She didn't call me trash. She didn't tell me I deserved it. She just listened. And for the first time in a long time, I felt heard. I began journaling. Every morning, before the world had the chance to crush me, I poured out my thoughts on paper. The pain, the guilt, the anger, the memories of laughter and love, the memories of betrayal. I spilled everything out until the weight felt lighter. Piece by piece, I started putting myself back together. I forced myself into new routines, waking up early, walking outside, cooking meals just for me. They weren't grand changes, but they were mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't living around someone else's needs. I was living for me. It was strange at first, not tying my worth to a man or a marriage. I didn't realize how much of my identity I had handed away until it was gone. And though it felt terrifying, it also felt freeing. But the biggest shift came when I started speaking. I stopped letting his whispers define me. I told my story, not to everyone, not to defend myself, but to reclaim it. I told friends the truth. I admitted my mistakes without shame, but I also revealed the parts they never saw, the loneliness, the neglect, the desperate hunger to feel wanted. And something incredible happened. People listened. Some even admitted their own secrets, their own mistakes. The shame that had been crushing me began to crack. And I realized something life-changing. The shame wasn't mine to carry anymore. The guilt was mine, yes. The responsibility for my choices, yes. But the humiliation? That belonged to the people who tried to weaponize my pain. I no longer begged for validation. I stopped trying to prove I was enough. Instead, I learned to stand in silence and command respect. Not through words, not through apologies, but through the way I carried myself. Day by day, I felt stronger. Not perfect, not healed completely, but unrecognizable from the woman who once believed being used was better than being invisible. And then it happened. I saw him again, my ex-husband. His eyes met mine across a crowded place, and for the first time since the day he left, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken, I felt powerful. And when I saw my ex-husband again, everything changed. It happened by accident. I wasn't searching for him. I wasn't waiting for some cinematic reunion. I was just living my life, running errands, carrying groceries, humming softly to myself, and then, suddenly, there he was, my ex-husband. For a second, time froze. The man who had once been my entire world was standing only a few feet away. But he wasn't the man I remembered. His shoulders slumped. His eyes carried shadows. His skin looked pale, his hair thinner. He seemed smaller somehow, like life had chipped away at him piece by piece. He spotted me and I saw it instantly, the flicker in his eyes, expectation. He expected me to break, to crumble into tears or spit venom, to demand answers or worse, to beg. That had been the rhythm of our marriage, after all, me reaching, him retreating. But I didn't crumble. Instead, I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not forced. A calm, steady smile that came from somewhere deep inside me. We stood there in silence for a moment. I could almost feel him searching for the script, waiting for me to act out the old role. But I wasn't her anymore. I spoke first. My voice was steady, quiet, but filled with something I never had before, certainty. Thank you. His brows furrowed, his mouth half opening in confusion. I didn't give him time to speak. Thank you for leaving, I said, my eyes never wavering. Because it forced me to rebuild, it forced me to find myself. The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and undeniable. He blinked, stunned, like no part of him had ever imagined I would thank him for the pain. And maybe, in a strange way, I did mean it. Not because what he did was right. Not because I deserved the abandonment or the whispers that followed. But because without the breaking, I would have never rebuilt. He looked speechless, his lips twitching like he wanted to defend himself, to argue, to reclaim some power. But he couldn't. His silence told me everything. He didn't have control anymore. I had taken it back. I adjusted the strap of my bag, gave him one last calm smile, and turned to walk away. My steps didn't falter, my chest didn't ache, my head didn't bow. I walked with my head high, radiant in a way I had never been before. Because I wasn't carrying the shame anymore. I wasn't trapped in the labels that used to crush me. I was free, and in that moment, I knew the truth. The story was no longer his to tell. It was mine. In the end, I wasn't a used woman. I was a rebuilt one,